Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
So today is I am not a trained counselor, but my students need help. Our presenter is Stephen Schmidt. I am Krista Mosier, your host, and Megan Webb is the co-host. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and let Steve Schmidt take it away.
Krista, thank you so much for getting things started, and I want to welcome you wherever you are across the great state of Texas to our webinar today, which is Welcome to I'm Not a Trained Counselor, but My Students Need Help. So glad that you're with us this afternoon. I am Steve Schmidt. Just in a way of a brief introduction, I have been involved in adult basic ed for 31 years. I guess you could say I'm doing adult ed backwards, because many people at adult ed start working part-time and then may move into a full-time position at some point in time, and I'm doing things the opposite way. In the 31 years I've been in the field, I have been an instructor for most of that time. I was a local program director for a time, and then since 2010, I have been working as a professional developer. I worked for 9 years at Appalachian State University, and since 2019, I've been working as a self-employed consultant. It is my joy to be with adult educators who I always say are the greatest people in the world. So thank you for making the commitment to be here today. I do love quotes, and you'll be seeing several throughout our webinar today. But I do love this quote from Jim Elliot, who said, "Wherever you are, be all there." And the tendency with webinars a lot of times is to say something like, "Oh, I'm going to play this webinar in the background while I check email and do other things that entirely take our focus off what's going on in the webinar." And then later that day or the next day, someone says, "Oh, did you do that webinar? What was it about?" And you're thinking, I have no idea, because we really weren't paying attention. My encouragement is, please give your full attention to the webinar. Whatever keeps you focused and keeps you involved, please be all there. And your emails will still be there in an hour. And thank you in advance for that. Did mention the handout. We will be referring to it frequently throughout today's webinar. And so if you look inside the page 2, you will see our objectives for today, which are threefold. That is our plan for today. Well, I want to start out with a story. I started in adult ed. I was, I think 25 years old. And here was a lot of what I would do back at that time. A student would come to me with a challenge, whether that was with their academics or their personal life, and they would briefly explain what was going on. And then I would immediately jump into advice giving mode. And I would do that despite the fact that I really did not know that student very well, that I had a pretty limited view of what their challenge was, but I thought I knew better. And I was all about diving in and giving advice in situations that I really didn't know necessarily a whole lot about. And so I did that for many years. And I'd been thinking about this topic because a lot of times in adult ed, as we know, we are asked to fulfill that role of a counselor. And it's great if we are trained as a counselor, but if we are not, we can quickly get in over our heads. And so that was really what the impetus was behind creating this workshop. So the past me was all about giving advice. And I'm going to tell you a different story. This is a picture of Durham, North Carolina, and I have it here because a few weeks ago, a friend invited me to help out his son, and he and I drove to Durham to do some things to help his son who was getting his first job and his first apartment, and I drove a car home for them from Durham to Boone. And my friend said, Steve, I have this problem and I really would like to get your advice about it. And so the new me is saying, I'm not going to give you advice. I didn't say that to him, but I was saying it to myself. What I did instead was to listen, hear him out as Travis talked about what the problem was. I asked him a lot of questions because I only saw a limited piece of the puzzle. And I tried to help him see what the root was of the issue. He was having some trouble with his neighbor, and I was trying to find out, what exactly was going on. And I had asked him a question like, do you value this particular outcome or the relationship with your neighbor more, to try to get a better feel? But he'd asked me several times, I want you to tell me your advice and what you would do. And I never did. I kept on asking him questions, and we looked at alternatives. You could do this might happen. You could do that. You could do the other. We explored alternatives. But I know Travis is perfectly capable of making a great decision. And I know he knows the situation with his neighbor far better than me. And so that is where I land now about advice giving. So curiosity and listening have replaced advice giving for me. Page 2, you will see toward the middle of the page this quote, and I would like us to chat a little bit about it. What I'm going to ask you to do in a minute is, what stands out to you the most about this particular quote? And the quote is this. This quote is from Dr. Henry Cloud, who wrote an amazing book called Changes That Heal. But Dr. Cloud says, some people think they know what others should do. They're unable to realize their own limited knowledge of a person's situation, as well as the person's responsibility or ability to deal with his or her own problems. They do not foster maturity in their client, but rather make them dependent on them. So I see 3 key points here. I would like you to just react to this. What stands out to you the most about this quote? And in a minute after we've done this, I'll talk about what I think are 3 key takeaways here. So I see things are bubbling up here in the chat. Several folks have reacted to the fostering dependence versus independence situation. Catherine's reacting to the word dependent, getting the personal responsibility. That's huge. Ensuring to not make the other person dependent on you. That's exactly what we don't want to do. Thank you, everyone who shared. But 3 key points as I see them in this. We've got limited knowledge of other people's situation. We want to develop our students' ability to deal with their own problems, and we want to foster independence in them. And us telling them what to do does neither of those 2 things. So I think we always need to be very careful when we dive into the advice giving realm. I want to share another quote. Now, this quote is not in your handout. This is a quote from Sudie Whalen, who works for the American Institutes of Research. And I was on a webinar one time with her, and she put this in the chat. And with her permission, I grabbed this out of the chat and I've used it because I think what she says here is very pertinent to our situation many times. She says, I think in adult education, we're often guilty of being dismissive of our learners, partially because we value our own expertise, but also because of the biases that we hold against folks whose educational backgrounds and income levels don't match our own. Anytime we make program level decisions without including our learners, we're dismissing their lived experience and the expertise that they could provide. And I think that's so true. The hard part about this quote, though, is because many times it is difficult for us to recognize our own biases. That is so hard to do. I've got another quote. This comes from a book by Dr. Mark Batterson. He wrote a book called Please, Sorry, Thank You. He quoted in the book a homeless man named Scooby. And Scooby said, we take one thing and make it the whole thing. What Scooby was referring to in particular there was his homelessness, that a lot of times those in the homeless community or those trying to help the homeless are only focused on the problem of the homelessness. And I think in adult ed, sometimes we are only focused on the fact that our students are lacking reading, writing, math, and speaking English abilities. And that takes our focus, whether we realize it or not. And that makes it easier for us to dismiss our students' lived experience. And that makes it easier for us to think we know better than them. And that's a dangerous place to be, I will argue. I have learned a lot recently about something called unconscious bias. But there's something, as I've been reading about unconscious bias, called the horn effect. And it's not talking about the horn instrument, it's talking about horns that one might have on their head, indicating that this person is less than. But the horn effect is you have a negative attitude towards someone based on one aspect of their lives. Maybe the very first time you met someone, they, quote, rubbed you the wrong way, and you've had a negative impression of them since that time. And I think sometimes we get that horn effect with our students because all we see is, oh, their income level doesn't match mine. Their academic skills don't match mine. Their living situation doesn't match mine. So therefore, we unconsciously have that horn effect. And this is hard. And I think everybody's saying, oh, no, I would never have this. But sometimes we do, and we don't really realize it. But it is hard to reflect, to bring out those unconscious biases. So let's take a minute of quiet reflection. What I want you to reflect on is this. Do I have an unconscious negative bias toward my students based on, and this could be several things, their lack of formal education, maybe they have a criminal record, maybe they're on public assistance, maybe their family situation is not that nice traditional nuclear family that we would like to see, and reflect on that. This is the time to be real and to be honest. Be thinking, does that really play a role when I see this or when I learn this about my student? Does that cause me to unconsciously treat them differently? And then for where we're going here, to think that I'm in the position of knowing better than them because I have a higher income, I don't have a criminal record, my family situation may be more stable, I have more formal education. And the big question is, if so, if we're really honest with ourselves, what can we do to change that unconscious bias? So what we've been doing is reflecting on a very challenging thing. Do we hold sometimes this unconscious negative bias toward my students based on whatever factor? So now I'm going to invite you, what could we do to show that we value our students? Well, one thing, if we are in the classroom, we could show that we value our students by giving them choices in what they're learning and how they are learning it. That gives them a voice. That shows we value what the students have to say. And it's a good universal design for learning principle as well, giving those students choices. And if we have to do an assessment of some kind, let them choose how they might show they've learned something, whether that be through a piece of writing or maybe a presentation done in Google Slides or them acting it out or something. Give students an opportunity to show what they've learned in the way that they'd like to do it. Janine is mentioning Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Oh, I love that, Marcia. Everyone that comes to see me is a blank canvas and I have to be the artist or help the student to be that artist. That's awesome. Let's see, Corey mentions, I can take the time to learn about cultures and different type of thinking. That's excellent. Delia says, get to know your students more to understand their culture. Nabor Cortez says, recognize our own bias and be aware of it. Take the time to learn to pronounce their name. The names are huge. Names are powerful. So let's look at page 3. I've been saying negative things about advice. What's wrong with giving advice? I am at the top of page 3, which says what's wrong with giving advice. And I'm going to read this. It says, someone comes to us with a problem and we, moved by the desire to be helpful, because we have big hearts as adult educators, want to immediately provide a solution. Don't we have this temptation almost constantly? It's almost comic. We might not have the solution to our own problems, but somehow we always manage to have the best advice for others. But what really happens when we provide advice? Unconsciously, we send the other person the message that he or she does not have the resources to solve their problem. We say, without saying it, you're not good enough. And we put ourselves on a pedestal pretending that we understand the other person's problem when we are really not in their shoes. And I've bolded this. The best way to give advice is to not give advice at all, but instead to listen deeply. Rather than saying, here's what you need to do, we need to shut up and open the ear of our heart. We need to create a space where the other person can articulate what's affecting him or her. Rather than providing a response, it's much more productive to be curious about the person's situation and encourage the conversation with open-ended questions. In articulating his or her problem, often the best solution becomes self-evident. Most of the time, the answer to a problem lies within us. All we need is to be reminded of how resourceful and how powerful we can be. The best advice is to silence ourselves in the temptation to provide immediate solutions and to lend an ear to the other. We're solution focused. We have a limited amount of time with our students, so that desire, number one, to help is huge, and that desire, number two, to get a solution so we can go on with whatever, fill in the blank here, is powerful and real. As we've been talking about, though, giving advice can be counterproductive. And a lot of times, because we don't really get the situation, we don't know the full picture, we're diving in where we maybe ought not to go. So I love this. The best advice is no advice, but listen deeply, help the student, guide them with some open-ended questions, and get them to really find out what the root is of the problem. And that is much more effective. So please highlight, circle, underline. The best way to give advice is not give advice at all, the one that's bolded in the middle, but instead to listen deeply. And that is indeed the best advice. Now, I want to show you 3 minutes of a video called How to Tame Your Advice Monster. This is a TED Talk that was done by a man named Michael Bungay Stanier, and he talks about the advice monster. What is the advice monster? The advice monster is that inner need that we feel, or that compulsion that we feel to give others advice. So he talks at the beginning of this TED Talk about meeting recently with a friend, and the friend launched into a challenge, and she hadn't talked for 30 or 45 seconds before he dived in and gave advice to her. And that's an example of the advice monster. And he talks about to tame the advice monster, we must understand it. So we're going to listen to Mr. Stanier talk about the advice monster and how to understand it. And if you want to follow along a little bit with some main ideas from this, take a look at the middle of page 3, where we have the heading of How to Tame Your Advice Monster. So again, we're just going to look at about 3 minutes of this. And as you're listening, your goal is to try to figure out if you have the advice monster, if that is your default mode, think about why you do it. He offers 3 suggestions. He'll talk a little bit about the tell it person, the save it person, and the control it person. And you may be one of these. You may be more than one of these, but that's your goal as you watch for these next 3 minutes, is to please think about which of these motivations is you.
I go. You have to learn to tame your advice monster. And to tame it, you have to understand it. And it turns out your advice monster has 3 different personas. And you listen up, you'll hear the one that resonates most for you. The first persona of the advice monster is tell it. Tell it. It's the loudest of the 3. It has convinced you that the only way that you add value is to have the answers, to have all the answers, to have all the answers to all the things. If you don't have all the answers, then you fail. Anybody kind of know this one? Yeah, I thought as much. The second advice monster, a little more subtle, it's called save it. Save it has put its arm around you and gone, your job, your only job, is to rescue everybody. Don't let anybody stumble, struggle, have a difficult time. Don't let anybody fail. If anybody struggles at all, you fail. Anybody know this one? Any parents in the room, for instance? Exactly. The third of the advice monsters, the sneakiest of the 3, is control it. Control it has convinced you that the only way you win is to maintain control at all times. Don't let go the grip of anything. If anybody else takes over control even a little bit, then you and they will definitely fail. Anybody know controller? That's my favorite one personally. And in fact, there's something that connects all 3 of these personas. And this is an important point. In that singular moment, when your advice monster is in control, you are saying that you are better than the other person. You are better than the other person. You're saying that they're not up to it. You're saying they're not good enough. You're saying they're not smart enough, wise enough, fast enough, moral enough, experienced enough. You're basically saying that they're not good enough. But it's not only the other person that is diminished in this moment when your advice monster is in control. You're diminished as well. Because when your advice monster is in control, you lose that connection to your humanity. You lose that connection to your empathy and your compassion and your sense of vulnerability. You start using your answers as your armor. Now, I was going to give you a quick little talk about the power of empathy and compassion and vulnerability, and then I thought to myself, Brené Brown. Oh, the Dalai Lama. Oh, Jesus. Okay, I think this ground's been pretty much covered. So rather than that, let me give you a quick primer on how you might go about taming your advice monster. And what you're looking to do is replace an old habit, the advice-giving habit, with a new habit. Can you stay curious a little bit longer? It's as simple and as difficult as that. Can you stay curious a little bit longer? How do you stay curious? Well, questions are the kindling of curiosity. They're the light that holds back that darkness of the advice monster.
All right, so we are going to stop there. And I wonder if any of these rang true to you. And this is a time, again, where we're looking to be very brutally honest with ourselves. Did any of these things ring true as we were watching there? Do you see yourself in any one or more of these advice monster personas? Are you the tell it person in that you think the only way you have value is to have the answers? Are you the save it person that your only job is to rescue everyone? Or are you the control person that the only way you win is to maintain control? So this is huge. I think if we can realize this, and none of this is going to be an instant fix, if we've been in the habit of giving people advice for years, we cannot stop on a dime. It's difficult to do, but we're going to get some strategies today to help us be able to do a more effective job of getting rid of that compulsion to tell everyone what to do, but instead practice some new techniques that can benefit not only our students better, but ourselves, as well as what other relationships we have within our family and in our community. One thing, if you're a control person, this is called the locus of control, and it's called a locus because we definitely have a circle attached to it. In the locus of control, there's two parts to it. We see a part on the left, we see a part on the right. We own, inside our own locus of control, things we can control are our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own emotions, our own beliefs, our own perceptions, our own actions, our own decisions, and our own words. But we need to realize we do not own anyone else's thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, perceptions, actions, decisions, or words. And sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking we do. We do not. And the only thing that we can control are the things that are within our own locus of control. So if you have done that voyage, that journey of self-discovery, and realize that you are a control freak, this might help. And this has helped me personally, because before I would try to own things that were not inside my locus. And I can tell you from personal experience that that will only lead to anger, frustration, shame, doubt, all these negative emotions that we do not want to carry around with us. And this has made me a much more healthy human being, realizing what's inside my locus and what's not. And really, what I have discovered and what I've felt is a big feeling of freedom by not trying to own and control those things that I cannot. It is tremendously freeing. And again, I would say this isn't a realization that you're going to own in a day. This takes time to go. But once you own it, wow, it is a freeing situation. So really would encourage you to think about this and about your own need to control and what's driving that. We've talked about the problems with giving advice. We've talked about unconscious biases we might have. We've talked about the advice monster and why that is not a good thing. And I hate going to webinars where they focus on all the problems, but then don't tell you what to do about So what I'm going to try to be is the guy who's going to give you some suggestions about things that you can use to help in this. So I'm at the bottom of page 3 of the handout, just under the Advice Monster stuff. What are some general guidelines we can do? And we've touched on some of these already. Listening, that curiosity, not listening with the intent of, oh, what am I going to say next? But listening with the intent to really hear what the other person is saying. We use the word empathy, that feeling of understanding. We also want to listen without judgment, because many times as we're talking with students, we hear things that we don't necessarily want to hear, and those unconscious bias surfaces as students talk about family situations and legal situations and other things. So we really need to listen with our full self and be curious and hear what the other person's saying without trying to rehearse our answers and without trying to dive in with here's what you need to do. A second general guideline is don't argue with the student. As a young instructor, I was the worst at this, and I have had several arguments with students, and it is not a good way to go. I thought I knew better, but one of the first things I learned in adult ed was even if your student's 16 years old, you're dealing with what I like to call an emerging adult. And you want to treat them as an adult. An adult gets choices. An adult is able to make their own decisions. Don't argue. Don't try to give advice. We've seen the pitfalls of that. Validate what the learner is going through. In other words, we need to put aside in the moment our own thoughts and feelings and really be in that place of acceptance of others' emotions. And then finally, refer students to appropriate resources for help. There's no way in our limited component with what we're dealing with academic skills that we can solve all the problems. There are many times community resources and professional counselors that are available to help. And I know depending upon your community, that may be more challenging to find, but those resources many times are out there. So get to know what resources are available in your community. I know several programs who've put together kind of like a cheat sheet. They've got a one-pager that's either available on the web or they've got a paper copy of community resources that can help. And we can pass that information along to students and really get the student in the hands of someone who has that specific niche knowledge that can help where we so often don't. So just some general guidelines to get us going. Got another quote. You know, I love quotes. This is a quote from Dr. Lori Desautels, and she said, "There is not a human being in this world who does not settle down a bit when they've been heard, seen, and felt." And I think if I had to put a definition on what does it mean to listen with empathy, I really think that's what it is. When we really hear what someone's saying, when we really see that authentic self they're sharing, and when we get that listening persona so the student feels like we felt what they're going through, that empathy, we have done a good job of being the quote unquote counselor for that student. What are they saying? We really can focus on that instead of focusing on other things, as we've mentioned. Let's take a look at page 4. So what can we do to help our students beyond the general guidelines? Well, we've got some sample scripts and some open-ended questions that we will see on page 4. So what is an open-ended question? Well, it's the opposite of a closed-end question. Closed-end questions can be answered with yes, no, A, B, C, the Battle of New Orleans, 1814, whatever. Open-ended questions invite a learner to get beyond a simple one-word answer. Looking at the top of page 4, open-ended questions cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. They create space for people to tell their story in their own words, thereby influencing the direction of the conversation and supporting encouragement. They also build relationships when coming from that place of curiosity, care, and concern. This is the heart of collaboration. You're shifting away from advice giving into asking questions that allow students to process the best way forward. Following up with, it sounds like you have some ideas to consider, or you've made difficult choices before. I'm glad you're thinking this through to make the right decision. Gives them something to process. We have a sample script here, and we can pick and choose things that might be helpful. Student comes to you with a problem, issue, challenge, or asks you for advice. You have a couple things that we could say to first validate the feelings and complement the strengths. Something just as simple as, man, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I admire how you've been able to come this far despite these challenges that you're facing. The key then next is to ask those open-ended questions. Questions like, please tell me more is a great one. And that kind of gets the ball rolling. The students talked a little bit. Many times the first challenge they mention is not the real challenge or the underlying issue. Getting them to talk more out of that place of curiosity will many times bring the real true issue to the foreground and help the student to see that and help them to decide on what's a good solution is. Some other questions we could ask in the open-ended variety would be, what do you think's the real challenge here for you, and why is that? How have you already tried to solve this? Or how have you managed to get through other difficult times in your life? Those are all good things. There are many other open-ended questions that we could use. We're trying to do some active listening. Some other suggestions would be something like, did I hear you say? Provide then a brief summary here that shows the person that you have been listening to what they're saying. So that gives a brief recap. So we validated some feelings. We've asked some open-ended questions to try to help the learner get to the heart of what their issue is. And then we're going to ask the student to explore alternatives. I had the wonderful opportunity last spring to do some instructional coaching with the Teaching the Skills That Matter initiative, TSTM. And as part of TSTM, one of the lessons in Teaching the Skills That Matter, which is an adult ed curriculum that you can find if you Google Teaching the Skills That Matter, that has several already pre-prepared lesson plans that are designed for adults in several areas like financial literacy and health literacy and other literacies. But I learned about, and you can see this on page 5, the ideal problem-solving tool. And it's called the ideal problem-solving tool because it's an acronym. The I stands for identify. What's the problem? The D stands for develop. What do we know about this problem? The E stands for explore. What are some potential solutions? So in that moment, we can invite the student to think about, okay, what could you do? Okay, we could do this. Okay, you could do that. You could do the other things. Explore. A is anticipate. What would be some potential barriers? If we do this, what's a possible challenge? If we do the other, what's a possible challenge? And then finally, with some time for reflection, what did we learn from doing this procedure? And I love this problem-solving tool because number one, it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, and it really puts the ball in the learner's court. We're giving them a tool that they can use to solve many problems that they will come up with in their lives. And it's just a great tool in general. So instead of us giving advice and saying, here's what you need to do, this provides a tool so our learners can explore various options for themselves. So real quick, real easy to use. You've got the handout there on page 5, and this comes from TSTM, which is free to use. So feel free to take it, copy it, use it, change it, modify it, however might best fit your needs. So what have we done? We've first validated feelings. We've complemented strengths. We've asked some open-ended questions to try to get the learner to tell us a little bit more so we can get to the heart of the issue. We've used the IDEAL tool, IDEAL, the acronym, to try to get students to explore options and alternatives. And at the end of this, we're not going to say, okay, choose that one. We're going to just help the student to see the alternatives and let them to explore it. I think one of the worst things about giving it advice is if our advice is wrong. We say, do this, and the student does it, and it really turns out to be terrible for them. And who's going to get the blame for that? This would be us. So that's another big reason to avoid giving advice. And then finally, offer whatever support that you can. And this would be the time, hey, community resources, did you know this was available? Did you know that was available? We've got these other things that are available. Here's what we can do at our program. Here's what you can receive out in the community. And also this suggests at the bottom of page 4, saying something like, how can we support you as you go through this? And the very bottom says, I believe you can get through this and still reach your educational goal. Could we schedule a brief check-in next week to see how things are going? And I think that's great. So that way the student can update you. I think this script and the IDEAL tool work much better than us with a limited knowledge of the situation saying, here's what you need to do. We've got some better tools out there. Let's put in the chat, please, what questions or comments do we have about the sample scripts or open-ended questions? What I would really love to hear in the chat would be something about, I'm doing this, here's some of the questions I use, here's the procedure I go through that's not advice giving, but instead of teaching the student to solve their own problem. Questions or comments or success stories from following a similar path with students. Let's see here. Laura Friedman mentions 2-on-1 has nationwide community resources. Thank you for that. Oh, and thank you, Dr. Jacqueline Miner. I was trying to think of that quote that you have put in the chat. You have done the best difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy says, I feel sorry for you. Empathy says, I understand you. And Dr. Miner has mentioned it's entirely possible to empathize and feel sympathetic. Absolutely. Let the adult learner know it's a joint effort and teamwork. Marcia, thank you for saying that. It's really a partnership. And so many times it either comes across as I'm the know-it-all and you're not. In the partnership is a much better way to do it. Thank you. What I would ask for you to do in the time that we have left, let's do a little more reflecting. This is something I discovered recently, the square, circle, triangle reflection. And the square is something that squares with your thoughts or something that you've heard before and you heard something today that you agree with has reinforced that. The circle is something still circling in your mind or a question that you might still have. And the triangle, what action that I'll take or change as a result of what I've heard. Would invite you, please, to put in the chat some reflections, something that squares, a question you might still have, or one action that I'll take as a result of what I've learned. Well, thank you all so much for being here. And I do hope that you're coming away with some good things. I do hope that you've done some self-reflection or will continue to do. Watch that full TED Talk from Mr. Stanier and really reflect about which of those you are. And I think we can all help our students make better decisions going forward when they can work on problem solving instead of us trying to tell them what to do. But anyway, thank you so much for being here today. And I hope that our paths will cross again at some point in time.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.